Well, we're finishing a series today we've been calling Road Rage. We've been talking about the idea that basically the whole world is mad. And have you noticed that? Or they've gone mad. But everywhere you turn, the world is loud, it's rude, it's obnoxious, and the whole thing, it's ubiquitous. People are screaming at each other face to face, or sometimes just in all caps on their computers or on their screens. But we've been talking about this anger for weeks, and to be honest, with all the effort that we've been putting in here, I haven't seen much change in anger in the world. But that wasn't really the point. The point was not to fix the world. The point was for us to look at ourselves, to evaluate how much anger is a part of our lives, and to start to do something about it, and to invite God to do something about the anger that we might feel in our lives. So maybe we could become a little bit less angry. Maybe we could turn down the temperature in ourselves, because we all kind of run at a temperature. I know, back a few weeks ago, I missed church because I was sick in bed with a fever, and I stuck the thermometer in my mouth, and you check it out, and there's that temperature, and we're all supposed to be running at 98.6. Usually, I think I run a little bit below that, but it was up over 100, and my wife's like, "Oh, you do have a fever," and so she knew that my complaining was legit. I wasn't just whining, okay? But we all have a temperature that we run at, I think, internally. And sometimes that temperature gets a little bit high and gets a little bit hot. And things happen in our world and people bump into us or a situation comes up. And whatever temperature we're running at, that's what actually comes out in our expression. And I can't speak for you, but I don't want to live at a high temperature. I don't want to be an angry, irritable, impatient person, a person that bites and barks and stomps my way through life, the person with a short fuse. And I don't think any of us want to be that way, right? So I guess to start with this morning is, how are we doing? We've been talking about this for 5 weeks. Have we made any progress when it comes to this idea of anger? Have you been able to identify some of the sources in your life of what's causing the anger? Because we said a lot of times where it presents and what's the actual cause are not in the same place. And maybe you have to go back and look at some things in your past. Maybe you have to address some trauma that you've gone through. Maybe you have to get some help with a counselor. But have you been able to identify, or have you taken time to identify some of those sources of anger in your life? Maybe for you, it's been more of focusing on not verbally expressing your anger in that moment where you just react and where it just comes spilling out of you. And where you've decided to stop in that moment and maybe say, okay, what's the best way to respond here? Or to stop in that moment and say, you know what, I probably need to listen here instead of just responding or reacting. We talked about the ideas of resentment and how that can lead to revenge. And how are we doing with that? How are we doing with that anger that's been sitting there for a long time? Have we dealt with it? Or do we still need to deal with that? And last week we even talked about something in a little bit different direction. We talked about the things that are okay to be angry about. And maybe that's a test, though, to say, okay, what is it that gets me angry? Is that really okay? Or are these the same things that Jesus got angry about? So I hope that we're all doing better, that we're a little less reactive, a little less resentful, maybe a little less angry. Hopefully we have honked the horn less. Or maybe we've been able to have congenial conversations with a mate or with a coworker, or maybe you've actually been able to talk to your own kids with an inside voice. I don't know, but what is it that's changed in you, where you've become nicer or calmer or more patient, or where the temperature has come down a little bit? Because if we're all honest, 95% of us have a problem in this area. That's not an official number, I just made it up, but I think I'm close. Because anger is just a part of our society, and anger is a part of our culture, and we see it in so many different ways, and I haven't even talked about all these. We see it in rage weariness. Do you ever get there? We're just exhausted by this culture. They call it the rage machine, right? And it's it just kind of keeps running over us. And maybe you resent the people that are fueling it, and they're everywhere, right? They're the influencers, they're the talk show hosts, they're the politicians, they're the talking heads. And it's everything that they throw at us is rage-based. And it's okay, I've had enough. And we want to put up the white flag. So we get rage weariness, we deal with rage manipulation. And sometimes it's just with the people in our lives who are used to using anger as part of their dysfunction to make things happen. And maybe it's a person that you have to deal with constantly over and over again. And it's like you're being manipulated and you're like, okay, I'm just not going to make that person mad. And then we end up doing what that person has manipulated us to do. We see that on a larger scale too. And where, mob mentality is based on what? It's on rage manipulation. People pushing buttons, and it's like everybody's buttons get pushed at the same time, and off we go. And it's just everywhere. But what it really comes down to me, is what I would call it rage agitation. It's just kind of like where you live in that constant state of just kind of like, "Argh." And when like little things like upset you more than they should, and like this, and then you run into these people who are deliberately trying to kind of get your goat. My brother used to do that. My brother's 5 years older than I was and quite a bit bigger than me, and he loved to pick on me and get me upset, and then I would start swinging. Well, he was big enough, he would just put his hand on my head, and he would just stand there, and I would swing away, and he would laugh. And of course, that calmed me down. And I would just swing harder, and he would just laugh harder. But don't you feel like that? We live in a world that's like got its hand on our heads and just kind of laughing at us sometimes. So what do we do with that? How do we get rid of that agitation that's going on inside us? Because let's be honest, life can be unfair. People can take advantage of us. You can be bullied. You can watch somebody else be bullied, and that can upset. There's all kinds of things that go on that legitimately make us mad. But how do we turn down the temperature inside of us? How do we get to the place where everything doesn't just upset us? How do we get to the place where maybe we can just like take a deep breath and deal with things rationally and intentionally and patiently? Today is a little bit of an anniversary of sorts in my family, my marriage actually, not my marriage, my relationship with my wife, because we met several years ago on this date, kind of. Like we met somewhere between last night and this morning, okay? Because we met on a leap year day, February 29th, and so like we are celebrating our 9.5 anniversary of when we first met. You can go back and figure out all the numbers on that one. But when we had our 30th wedding anniversary, we went off to England and celebrated that way. But we went to the London, and one of the things we did was the Churchill War Rooms. Has anybody been to the Churchill War Rooms? Really cool, right? And you kind of go down into the bunkers beneath London there, where the war was waged, at least from the British standpoint. And you see all these different rooms, and some of them are really fascinating because they're like left the way that they were the last time they were used. Like there's like still like pencils and things on the desk that haven't been touched since World War II. But one of the things that you will not see, that we did not see in this tour, was a poster that you would think you might see, and it looks like this. Have you ever seen that? Keep calm and carry on. That was the theme of World War II, right, in Britain? False. That poster was never discovered until the year 2000. It was put together by the Ministry of Information in Britain, and it was supposed to be used if anything catastrophic happened. They would put these out to try to get people to, but nothing catastrophic ever happened in London, and so those posters were never used, and it was discovered back in 2000, the first time. Now, if you go to the war rooms, you won't see it on the wall because it wasn't on the wall there. You will find it in the gift shop. And so if you want a Keep Calm and Carry On poster, you can get it in the bookshop. But you know what? There's a sentiment there that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? There's a sentiment there that kind of like speaks to us to say like, okay, we live in this agitated world. How can I keep calm and just carry on? And that's what we want to explore today. And we want to explore it from the perspective of David, who wrote a psalm, Psalm 37. If you want to, you can turn there. And we're going to be looking at verses all throughout this psalm. There are like the first 11 verses printed on the back of your outline. And if you want to follow along with that, that would be fine as well. But we're going to be looking at this. It's a little bit of an unusual psalm. First of all, it's an acrostic psalm. It doesn't work for us in English, but if you could read Hebrew, There's 22 stanzas here, and each one starts with a letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So all of you Hebrew scholars, you can dive in this morning. But it's kind of interesting that, so it was kind of it's a poem as much as a psalm, and it was designed and written to be, I don't know the word that you want, but very, the prose is very intentional. Secondly, though, it's instructive versus reflective. A lot of the Psalms that we read, we just kind of get to look over the psalmist's shoulders, and we get to see their psalmist's heart as they deal with things in life and as they cry out to God. That's how a lot of the Psalms work. This is not like this. This is a psalm that's kind of like saying, hey, you know what? This is something you're going to run into in life, and here's how you deal with it. So it actually kind of reads almost more like the Proverbs do than it does like the Psalms do. And so this is actually David looking at a situation in life and saying, here, let me give you some counsel. Let me give you some advice. And so the audience is not necessarily God. The audience is actually people like you and like me. And when David writes this psalm, this is one of the psalms that he writes towards the end of his life. And he's gotten older, and he's looking back at life, and he's got some things to share, and he's got some perspectives he wants to make known. And I think, though, as David gives us this psalm, he's addressing an area specifically in the anger world, but it actually has wider ramifications. So let's read through these first 11 verses, and this will kind of give us a feel of the chapter. It's kind of repetitive. You can go on and read more on your own, but a lot of these same themes keep coming back up. But we'll start at verse number 1. Do not fret because of those who are evil, or be envious of those who do wrong. For like grass, they will soon wither. Like green plants, they will soon die away. Instead, trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will do this. He will make your he will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, or when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret, it only leads to evil. For those who are evil will be destroyed. But those who hope in the Lord, they will inherit the land. A little while, and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found. But the meek, they will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity. So if you back up there, if you look at verse number 8, there's an interesting instruction that's given here. David says, refrain from anger and turn from wrath, and do not fret. It only leads to evil. If you back up to verse number 7, that same word shows up again. Be still before the Lord, wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. And if you go all the way back to verse number 1, it says what? Do not fret because of those who are evil, or be envious of those who are doing wrong. And we run into this word here, fret. Now, when we think of the word fret, we generally think of the word that would go with that would be worry. Don't worry about those people. Don't let that be your problem. Let that be. But that's not actually what that word means. That word fret is actually a word that's more aligned with the idea of anger. And it literally means this: do not become inflamed, incensed, or heated up. Don't let the temperature go up inside of you and start to burn you up from the inside out. Interesting, isn't it? So here's what we know to start with from reading these verses. First of all, we're instructed not to fret or not to let the anger burn within us, which means that we have control in this situation. God never tells us anything. The Bible never tells us anything that this is what you're supposed to do or not supposed to do. If God says that, the implication is simply this: you can do it. God's never going to ask you to do something you can't do. So this is something when he says, don't let the temperature go up. We have the ability to do that. So it's possible for all of us, and here's a phrase that we use sometimes, and I think it fits really well here. It's possible for all of us to keep our cool. We use that sometimes, right? But we all have triggers in our lives that is like, boom, it hits that, and it's like the burner on the stove. We just turn it up. And David had a trigger here too. And so this passage is dealing with one of David's triggers, but I think we could take it and we can apply it across the board. And what was the trigger for David? The trigger for David was when he saw people doing the wrong thing and they were getting away with it, and it just burned him up. Been there? You watch somebody at work and they're deceitful and they are dishonest and whatever, and they get the promotion and you're like, ugh. Or you know, sometimes at school you watch that kid cheat, and then they get, they score the better score and get away with it, and you're like, ah. And we see this in life too. I'll tell you what it is. It's the person who makes it through the yellow light in front of you. But we have those things that just kind of like, and they just turn up the temperature there. So that may not be your trigger. It could be something totally different. It's when somebody treats somebody unfairly, or when somebody like starts going off and bragging about somebody, or when somebody just is kind of like doing whatever it takes, to kind of put their hand on your forehead and let you swing away. How can we turn down the temperature? There's 6 words or 6 concepts that come from this chapter. And 3 of them are clearly spelled out, and 3 of them I think we can infer from this chapter. And I just want to present them and the idea behind them this morning and say, hey, if you're dealing with, here's how to turn down the temperature a little bit. And one of these might be helpful to you, maybe all 6 will be, or 3 of the 6, whatever. However is helpful, at least find the one for yourself this morning and say, you know what, that's what I need to focus on. So let's start here. The first word is the word, it comes from Psalm 37:3. It says, trust in the Lord and do good, dwell on the land and enjoy safe pasture. And so the first word that we're going to use this morning is the word actually pasture. And it gives us a great picture of what? Well, when you think of pasture, you think of sheep, and they're off in the field, and the sun's out, and the wind's blowing, and the grasses are waving back and forth. And there's just this flock of sheep, and they're just munching away, oblivious to what's going on in the world around them. And that's the idea here. When David says to enjoy safe pasture, it's the idea that you can go into a field that's protected, the shepherd's looking out for you. There could be pigs having a grand old time in the slop, in the sty next to you, but you're in these pastures, and that's all not part of the picture that you're enjoying. And I think this is something that God wants for us, and this is something that God invites for us, is this concept of like, you know what? I'm not going to be over here with the pigs that are fighting it out. I'm going to come over here with the sheep that are just peacefully grazing. And we get the choice, we get the option of where we're going to live our lives. We can live our lives in the commotion. We can live our lives in the anger. Or we have the choice to live our lives in this pasture that David talks about here. He says, trust in the land, dwell in the land, and enjoy safe pasture. Take a deep breath and enjoy the freshness of the morning. And all throughout this chapter, in fact, 5 or 6 times, David talks about inheriting the land. And this is the land that you inherit. It's the land of rest. It's the land of like, okay, wait a minute. That doesn't need to be my problem. I can live over here in this place that's peaceful, this place that's quiet, this place that's kind. And that's the first word here. In verse number 18 and 19, David says more about this. He says, the blameless spend their days under the Lord's care, and their inheritance will endure forever. In times of disaster, they won't wither. Actually, in times of famine, they will enjoy plenty. And the idea here is grace. Where the world wants us to be agitated and the rage machine keeps throwing all this stuff at it, we can choose to move to God's pasture, and where we can graze on the idea of grace. Where we can enjoy God's plenty, not because we deserve it, just because we have a shepherd that's good to us. And that's the idea here. Find your pasture. Choose the fields that you will graze in. You don't have to live over here. You can deliberately say, you know what, I'm not going to get caught up in this. I'm going to go over here, where I know that my God's in control, where I know that God is my shepherd, and I'm going to graze on grace. The second word shows up in verse number 7. David writes, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways." And what's the idea we get of that verse is like, okay. And it's just like this passively just, let's see what happens here. Well, that's not exactly what this means. When it says be still, it's not just talking about being calm, but it's actually saying, hey, calm down. Stop flailing. When everything inside you wants to do something and where you want to lash out and whatever, it's like put the wraps on yourself. That's what it means to be still. It means like get a hold of yourself here. Be still before the Lord and then wait patiently. And again, the English is not the best here because it's like, what it means to wait patiently means to actually literally writhe in your pain. It kind of like ruins that verse for us that we've liked so long, right? But here's what it's saying is like, you know what? Calm down. And even though it hurts, bring it in. My dog has had some health problems lately, so she's made a few trips to the vet. Well, she's not a big fan of the vet, which I like the vet. He's a really nice guy. I don't know why she doesn't like him. I mean, he sticks things in her, with shots and different things like that. But anyhow, but this is it. When she goes to the vet, she is just like this, and it's the idea of getting calmed down. And, I said, like, do you need me to hold her? And like, no, we can hold her. But we need to do that to ourselves sometimes. Like, okay, But we can do that because we know that God is part of the picture. God is there. He's willing to step in and to step out when it's appropriate. In the moment, we may just have to live with that attention, that tension. It's like, okay, this is horrible, and I don't know what to do here, and I'm all worked up. And we need to say, okay, God, I know you got this. I don't know why you're not doing what I need you to do right now, but I will live in this tension, and I won't get ahead of you. So the point is this, it's okay to wrestle with things, just refuse to get ahead of God. Or don't take things into your own hands. That's what patience means. Not just where you're like, oh, well. It's like, okay, I am going to make a choice here and to basically stand down and let God stand up. Third word is peace. Verse number 10 and 11. A little while and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found. But the meek will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity. And peace is an inside job, isn't it? And this is really what we're aiming for. The world that's so rage-driven and anger-driven and turmoil-driven is just like this. And you just feel it more like that. And what God offers, and what David is suggesting here is to say what? Okay, I'm still okay. All of this can be flying all around me, but I am still okay on the inside. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to replace that inner burning with a sense of peace. And here's some interesting things. Why can we be peaceful? Well, because of what David keeps saying through this whole thing is like, hey, what? I'm going to take care of the wicked. God's going to take care of the wicked. I'm going to step in. God's going to step in when it's time to step in. So, all the things that they're doing, I mean, justice will be served someday. So you can just relax about that. And you can just relax into or rest into this idea of, I got you. Those things aren't a threat. They're not permanent. They look that way. But instead, you can relax. You can look into what you've been given. You can be looking into the fact that you've been given a land. You've been given plenty. You've been given peace. It keeps saying inherit the land. Not just you're going to get land. It's like you're going to inherit the land. When you inherit land, you don't fight for it. God just gives it to you. And this is what God is offering. He says, I've got peace for you. It comes as an inheritance. It comes as a grace. It's not something that we have to fight for. It's something that we can lean into, that we can trust God for, that we can say to God, you know what, I don't have this figured out. And everything inside me wants to fight against this, but I am going to actually lean into you and ask for your peace in this situation. It comes from him. And so the relationship then with him becomes the key. So instead of focusing then on all these things that are going on around us, we change our focus to what? To God and who he is. And we make peace a primary goal. And we realize that peace happens on the inside. Which gets us to our fourth word, which is promise. And this is suggested throughout the psalm. It doesn't show up there specifically. But over and over again, God promises to do what? I'll take care of your situation. I'll deal with that person who's causing you grief. I will take care of the wicked. They're not going to get away with this. Justice will be served. I'm promising you all of this so that you can respond over here in this way. In verse number 2, he says what? For like the grass, they'll soon wither. Like the green plants, they will soon die away. Verse number 10, a little while the wicked will be no more. Verses 12 and 13, the wicked plot against the righteous and gnash their teeth at them. But the Lord laughs at the wicked. He knows their day is coming. Verse number 35 and 36, the wicked flourish like a luxuriant native tree, and yet they are no more. So there's the promise that God is in control, and there's the promise that God is going to play the long game. That bugs me sometimes. There's the promise that God will deal with the situation and God will deal with the wicked. And there's also even the promise that you will be rewarded. It's not just that God says I'm going to take them out of the picture. It's like I'm going to give you a reward in their place. And so there's this promise that's going through this whole chapter. And the promise is what? You can stop fighting for yourself. You don't have to even the score. You can step back. You can sit down and say, okay, God, you said you'd take care of this. I'm going to let you take care of this then. I'm going to live underneath this promise. Here's what it appears to be, but this is what you said, so this must be as it actually is. And we claim that promise and say, okay, I don't have to get worked up here because God said. Now that's, to be honest, I wrestle with, did I want to pick the word here, promise, or did I want to pick the word person? Because a promise is only as good as the person who makes that promise. And so we need to cling to the God who makes this promise. And we can say it this way. We need to believe that God will keep his word, that God will live by his character, that God will do what is best, and even at the best time, because God is all wise. And so we can lean into the promise of the person of God and say, okay, right now I want to panic. Right now that temperature is rising, and I can say, okay, wait a minute. Who's God? Not where is God. Who is God in this situation? The fifth word shows up in Psalm 37:3, 4, 5, 6. Let's read them again together. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord. He will give you the desires of your heart. This doesn't sound like an angry person, does it? Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. And here's the word that I would pick that describes these verses. It's practice. Sometimes we're in this situation. Sometimes we find ourselves worked up. Sometimes we've got that agitation going on inside us. And we're like, I don't know what to do with this, and I don't know what to do with this situation. In fact, there's nothing I can do with this situation. I just have to grit my teeth and hang on. And there's the encouragement here from David, from God's word to say, oh, no, you can do something here. You can take all kinds of steps. You can trust in the Lord. Literally, that means you can run to God for refuge. Help me, God. Here I come. He says, you can do good. You know, the fact that somebody else is doing evil in the world doesn't mean that you can't do good. In fact, you need to look for those places, and you need to go do those things. He says what? Enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord. And that actually means to indulge in your relationship with God. To lean back into it. You know, like when you're a kid and you would kind of lean into your mom when you were scared or afraid or upset or whatever, and she would kind of embrace you. That's the picture of this. Lean back into God. You can do that even in that moment. You can also commit your way to him. And the language here is you can take the load that's too heavy for you and you can roll it off yourself and onto God. But you can take action. And actually, these actions that are mentioned here help us grow in our relationship with God. But we can also take action when it comes to our relationships with other people. If you go on in the chapter, David says more things. He says in verse number 27, turn from evil and do good. In verse number 21 and 26, he says, hey, be generous. In verse number 30, he says, speak wisdom and justice. In verse number 37, he says, seek peace. And all through this chapter, it's like, okay, give it to God, and then you go make things better somehow. And when we start to be, what does that do? That removes us from the reactionary to response. Instead of like responding in kindness, like we can go back a couple weeks, I'm going to overcome this evil with good. And so I can take steps to actually not just lower the temperature inside myself, I can lower the temperature in the room here. And God's call to keep doing good is not hindered by the evil of others or by that thing that has got us worked up. So you can always do something. Of course, just make sure it's the right thing. And when we do the right thing, it's usually the hard thing. And in that situation that's got you angry, the right thing may be the hard thing, but that's still what you need to do. The last word here, I think, comes from this overall chapter here. And it's the word perspective. And it's where we actually can step back and say, whoa, time out. When it's right here, I'm going to get worked up. When it's back here, or when it's this far out, or when it's this far out, I can step back and say, well, this isn't the biggest thing in the world. And the longer you live, the more we get perspective. In fact, David says that in this chapter. I forget which verse it is. He said, I've been young, but now I'm old, and this is how I'm seeing things. The way I'm seeing the world is that God eventually works things out. The wicked, they don't triumph. The righteous triumph. The children of the righteous, they're taken care of. And he steps back from the situation and says, okay, it's not as big as I think. And we know that in life, don't we? We've been in those moments where it's just churning inside of us. And you're like, like that. And then a year later, we can kind of remember the episode, but we can't even remember what the issue was. And 5 years later, like, we don't even remember anything about it, other than the fact that there's this person one time. But that's it. Sometimes as we get in that moment and we get so right here and everything's just like coming at us and its temperature goes up. And the perspective is to step back and say, okay, wait a minute. Let's see what this really looks like. First of all, we see that we have a God who is in control in this situation. We have a God who's actually writing our story. He can actually use this situation for good in our story. And I want to be out of it, and I want to move on. And God's like, how about if I just leave that here? Because there's some good that can come out of that, and that is perspective. He concludes the chapter, and let me read these verses. I have seen a wicked and ruthless man. He was flourishing like a luxuriant tree. But he soon passed away and he was no more. I looked for him, but I couldn't even find him. That's perspective. Consider the blameless, observe the upright. A future awaits for those who seek peace. That's perspective. Sinners, they will all be destroyed. There will be no future for the wicked. That's perspective. The salvation of the righteous comes from the Lord. He is their stronghold in time of trouble. The Lord helps them and he delivers them. And he delivers them from the wicked and he saves them because they take refuge in him. That's perspective. There's so many times that in the moment it's like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. Or in the moment, like it's like I can't even control my emotions here because I'm so angry and this has me so upset. And there's an invitation here to step back and say, wait, how does God see this? Does God see this situation as being wildly out of control? No. And actually, how does God see the people in this situation? And so maybe the people that I'm angry with and just like want to pound on it or whatever, God's like, if you took a different approach here, this could be completely different. But it's getting perspective. It's seeing God in your world and then trying to see the world as God sees it. And so there's 6 words here, there's 6 ideas, and they're all kind of to steer us in that same direction of, keep calm and carry on. And as I mentioned before, you can go to the war rooms and you can go to the bookstore and you can buy the poster, except not right now because I looked this morning and they're out of stock. Sorry. And you can hang it on your wall and you can look at it anytime you feel the temperature rising and maybe you need to go over and put your hand on it. Or you can choose to live in the fields of grace. When everything over here is going crazy, you're like, no, that's not the world I'm going to live in. I'm going to live in a world of structure and order and grace and kindness and God. You can wrestle with things, but don't get ahead of God. And rather than being upset about everything that's going on around you, you can focus and look for peace on the inside, the space that you can control. You can remind yourself of the person and the character of God, who cannot do anything but what is right and loving and wise and good and kind. You can still do good. You can make the world a better place. In fact, you might even take whatever that is that's got you so worked up and say, you know what? In contrast to that, I'm going to practice this over here. And you can still step back and get some perspective. Because if you're agitated and if you're all worked up, you need to apply some of these principles. See, the enemy doesn't need to destroy you. He just wants to get you agitated. And too often, we're like me as a little kid when my brother was picking on me. The world comes along and somebody who's ornery or somebody who's difficult or somebody maybe evil comes and pokes or kicks us or whatever else like that, and we react and we start swinging, and it just puts its hand on our heads. And we just keep swinging harder and harder. You know what I learned? I learned that when my brother teased me and provoked me and put his hand on my head, if I just stopped swinging and walked away, it just ruined all his fun. And then when he wasn't looking, I could hit him with something. No, never mind. You know what God wants for you? He doesn't want us swinging away. He wants us to keep calm and to carry on. Let's pray. God, there's an enemy out there who wants to agitate us. There's a world out there that's constantly doing things that drive us crazy. And yet you are a God who promises or offers us peace, who offers us pasture, who encourages us with patience, who offers us actually your person. Help us to lean into those things this week, I pray. Our heads are bowed, our eyes are closed. We listed 6 things. Maybe all 6 of them are helpful to you. Maybe there's just one of them that's like, you know what, I really got to think about that. I really need to claim that. I really need to make that my own. Which will it be? Will you take a moment here in the silence this morning to make that decision? And then I would say this. Maybe you've come this morning, you've never really made the decision to follow Jesus. You can try to do all these things and it will be helpful to you. But you can also invite Christ into your life and then he does those things from the inside out. You ultimately can't give yourself peace, but he can. You ultimately can't even give yourself perspective, but he can. You can't even give yourself pasture, but he can. And so I'd invite you this morning, if you've never made a decision to follow Jesus Christ, that you make that decision. And Jesus, please come into my life. I want to follow you. Forgive my sin. Give me forgiveness, freedom, but I want to follow you. And you can make that decision where you sit this morning. If you have questions about that, I'd love to talk to you. Catch up with me sometime. But God, we live in a world where the enemy wants to agitate us. where it's so easy for the temperature to rise within us. Jesus, Holy Spirit, God the Father, please help us to get the same mindset, the same heart posture as David had, and to trust you. We ask these things in Jesus' name, amen.